The live stream spiraled in seconds. Ethan Miller said, "Stop watching, this isn't what it looks like," his voice cracking under the weight of panic. His face, once the symbol of effortless confidence, twisted in terror. The camera captured his trembling hands as his followers poured in, flooding the chat with laughing emojis and taunts. His laptop wobbled on the desk, every slam of his palm echoing louder than his broken words. The screen flickered with chaos, 1,000 hearts exploding not in love, but in mockery. Ethan's reflection stared back at him from the glossy screen, a stranger drenched in sweat, while his online empire collapsed in real time. His screams sliced through the feed before a hand shot across the frame, slamming the laptop shut. The chat froze mid-scroll, leaving only the echo of silence. For a moment, the internet held its breath, then released a howl of savage amusement that raced faster than he could ever run from it. The video didn't end with the laptop shut. It was ripped, clipped, and spread like gasoline on fire. Ethan's meltdown replayed across TikTok feeds, stitched with laughing faces and cruel voiceovers. "He's finished," one viewer sneered in a reaction video. Ethan Miller said, "They weren't supposed to see this," his words trapped inside a storm he could no longer control. Every scroll brought new edits, soundtracked by mocking songs. Millions who never knew his name now laughed at his downfall. The internet had turned him into a caricature, a joke stripped of humanity. Ethan's own voice became an audio clip, spliced into parodies he could not escape. What was once his stage had become his execution ground, each share hammering another nail into his coffin of digital humiliation. News outlets joined the pile-on. Morning shows replayed the meltdown in polished segments, anchormen smirking as if it were harmless fun. Ethan Miller said, "This isn't news, it's my life unraveling," but his words vanished under studio laughter. Headlines labeled him the influencer who cracked, stripping him of name and identity. Reaction channels stitched his clip with sarcasm, their subscriber counts climbing. Sponsors dropped mentions of him mid-ad, rewriting deals in silence. The machine of digital media chewed him raw and spat him out as entertainment. For Ethan, every flicker of a TV screen was a mirror of his downfall. Every commentator, another executioner with a smile. Alone in his dim apartment, Ethan slammed the lid of his laptop shut again and again, as if he could crush the noise bleeding from every corner of the internet. Ethan Miller said, "Make it stop, please," his voice hoarse, but silence never came. His walls vibrated with faint echoes of his own breakdown, replaying on devices across the city. Neighbors laughed through thin walls, unaware their entertainment was his ruin. Each vibration of his phone was another notification, another cut across his sanity. He stared at the black screen, his reflection warped and alien. For the first time, Ethan wondered if the world he built was nothing but a cage, and the bars were made of pixels he could not escape. Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, all of them burned with Ethan's name. Hashtags trended at light speed, each cruel twist of his meltdown stamped into digital stone. Ethan Miller said, "I'm more than this video," but his plea drowned under waves of laughing gifs. The mob crowned him their clown for the week. Strangers who once liked his charm now devoured his weakness with delight. His follower count became a countdown clock to zero, each drop celebrated by memes and taunts. The shame was no longer his alone. It had been weaponized for the crowd. In the digital square, Ethan was stripped, mocked, and paraded endlessly. The humiliation was unstoppable, the silence of his offline life crushed beneath the roar of millions. Ethan lay on his couch, the ceiling above him spinning, his chest rising and falling in uneven gasps. Ethan Miller said, "This isn't me, this can't be my ending," his voice fragile as though speaking might shatter him further. His phone buzzed endlessly on the coffee table, a drumbeat of shame. Family photos stared at him from dusty frames, reminders of a life before filters and likes. He pressed his palms to his face, but no darkness could hide him from the storm outside. The glow of his phone lit his apartment like a lighthouse, but instead of safety, it called in the wolves. His world, crafted carefully in pixels, felt like glass now, thin, cracking, and sharp enough to cut him as it broke. At his kitchen table, his mother scrolled through headlines, her hands trembling on the screen. Margaret Miller said, "Why are they doing this to him?" Her voice broke in the silence of their modest home. The smell of coffee went untouched as she stared at the endless cruelty in the comments. Across from her, his younger sister, Emily, bit her lip until it bled, whispering, "They don't even know him." Their world wasn't digital, yet the firestorm had invaded it, turning their sanctuary into another battlefield. Every notification on her phone was another dagger into their family pride. Ethan's collapse was no longer just his. It spilled across their lives like spilled ink, impossible to clean. Later, Anna sat beside Ethan in his dim room, her silence heavier than words. She placed a hand on his shoulder, but her eyes carried secrets she did not share. Ethan Miller said, "I can't tell who's still with me." The silence stretched, sharp as glass. Anna finally whispered, "I'm here," though her gaze flicked away, betraying her unease. The glow of the laptop's dark screen reflected both their faces, his twisted in pain, hers masked in unreadable calm. For Ethan, her presence was the only anchor. Yet her stillness left a hollow ache. Loyalty and betrayal danced together in her eyes, leaving him more uncertain than ever. Somewhere across the city, Daniel Carter sat in a quiet cafe, smirking as he replayed Ethan's meltdown on his phone. Daniel Carter said, "All it took was one slip," his words dripping with smug satisfaction. Once Ethan's collaborator, now his rival, Daniel savored the collapse like fine wine. Around him, patrons were lost in their own worlds, unaware of the venom behind his calm face. To Ethan, Daniel had been an ally, but to Daniel, Ethan had always been a stepping stone. Each notification on his screen was proof of his rising relevance, fueled by another man's destruction. In his reflection, the cafe window showed not guilt but triumph. Meanwhile, the online mob devoured Ethan's pain like a feast. Behind every profile picture was a stranger, laughing, mocking, piling on. Ethan Miller said, "They're not even real faces, but the cruelty still cut deeper than knives." In bedrooms, buses, offices, and schools, millions watched his downfall with gleeful detachment. They shared memes faster than they blinked, delighting in each exaggerated screenshot. To them, he wasn't Ethan Miller, a person. He was content, a spectacle to consume. The faceless crowd grew louder, the noise vibrating across every corner of the digital landscape, unstoppable, unmerciful, and ready for more. Screenshots landed like shrapnel across timelines, each crop crueler than the last. Ethan Miller said, "Those were drafts, not confessions, but the captions declared guilt before proof." Anna said, "Log off now," and killed the Wi-Fi, yet the fire kept burning. Threads braided half-truths into ropes, pulling him toward the gallows of public opinion. Daniel Carter said, "Own it or be owned," while posting a smug breakdown of the receipts. Ethan scrolled anyway, letting the blade turn. Brand emails blinked like evacuation lights. He whispered apologies to no one and everyone. The chorus outside grew sharper, hunting for fresh angles. A final ping arrived, promising more context, which always meant less mercy. Morning cracked open with a calendar alert titled, "Partnership Sync," which now meant execution. A brand rep spoke in soft bullets and careful smiles. Maya Park said, "We're pressing pause pending internal review, like a velvet guillotine." Ethan Miller said, "We had a launch next week, as if the future existed." Legal phrases glided across the call like ice. Metrics were cited, but none that measured shame. Anna watched from the doorway, arms folded, unreadable. Ethan promised statements he could not write. The rep left the meeting with perfect manners. The call ended with a cheerful chime that sounded like a laugh. By noon, the numbers began to molt. The follower count ticked down in slow horror, a drip that felt like bleeding. Ethan Miller said, "It's just a phase," but the app refreshed like a heartbeat. Comments traded empathy for punchlines. Old fans edited their bios, deleting his tag with surgical pride. A spreadsheet tracked the fall in sterile columns, as if suffering were tidy. Anna said, "Close it," though she watched the graph plunge too. The room inhaled silence and exhaled dread. Screens thrive on motion, so the metric obliged. Every 1,000 gone felt like a floorboard dropping. Somewhere brighter, a creator dressed scandal as opportunity. Riley Stone said, "Let's talk about accountability," while arranging neon lights and affiliate links. She stitched Ethan's clip between sponsorship reads like garnish. The title promised nuance. The thumbnail promised blood. Ethan Miller said, "She doesn't know me," though the algorithm disagreed. Ad breaks punctuated his grief with cheerful jingles. The chat offered popcorn and moral clarity. Riley cited sources with clean graphics and crooked certainty. The video ended with a discount code and a smirk. The view counter sprinted like it had wings. Night folded in, and the timeline went quiet enough to hear the creep beneath it. A new account appeared with an icon of static. The first DM arrived like a whisper under a door. Noah Gray said, "I've been here since your first upload," and attached a folder. Ethan Miller said, "Who are you?" though he already hated the answer. Photos he never posted hovered like ghosts. Footage from a window across the street chilled the room. Anna said, "This is not a fan," and locked the latch. The storm outside the screen had just found the keyhole. The folder opened like a wound. Inside were screenshots not from strangers, but from Anna's device. Ethan Miller said, "This came from you," his voice breaking into jagged edges. Anna said, "You don't understand," though her eyes told him he did. The timestamps carried her fingerprint, each file a betrayal wearing her name. Ethan slammed at the desk, the sound louder than his denial. The silence between them filled the room with accusations. For months, trust had been their shield, now turned into the sharpest blade. Anna looked down, tears trembling but never falling. Ethan realized, the mob was never the only enemy. Anna's silence echoed louder than screams. Ethan Miller said, "Were you waiting for me to drown?" His words cracked like ice. Anna said, "I didn't mean for it to go this far," but her tone wavered with buried intent. The air pressed down on them like concrete. Ethan remembered nights she guarded his secrets, only now realizing what she had kept hidden. Her loyalty had been performance, a shadow draped over truth. Every glance backward through their history twisted new daggers into his chest. She wasn't enemy nor ally, but something far worse, unreadable, uncertain, lethal in her restraint. Elsewhere, Daniel Carter reveled in the chaos. He streamed live, eyes glinting under ring light glare. Daniel Carter said, "Turns out, the betrayal was homemade," his grin slicing like glass. The chat erupted with fire emojis, feasting on every rumor. Ethan Miller said, "He's twisting this," though even truth felt like poison now. Daniel painted himself as a sage, the one who saw it coming all along. He wasn't leaking secrets, he was curating them, each word calibrated to wound. The crowd rewarded his cruelty with subscriptions. Rivalry had never been about content. It had always been about blood. On YouTube's front page, Riley Stone's commentary dominated. Riley Stone said, "The receipts prove more than one villain," her tone syrupy with authority. She stitched clips of Ethan and Anna side by side, the betrayal packaged like a morality play. Sponsors flocked to her videos while Ethan's inbox turned to ash. Ethan Miller said, "She's feeding on my corpse," but no one heard beneath the algorithm's roar. Riley smiled into the lens, holding power disguised as analysis. Every subscriber she gained was another brick in his tomb. Her throne was built from the rubble of his trust. The internet fractured like glass. Half the mob painted Ethan as villain, the other crowned him victim. Hashtags waged war across timelines. Ethan Miller said, "They don't know who I am," but strangers debated his soul in threads longer than essays. Anna's name began trending beside his, sometimes worse, sometimes spared. Daniel Carter fanned the flames, Riley profited, and Noah Gray whispered from the shadows. For the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't about truth. It was about narrative. and narratives were monsters, feeding on whoever bled the most. The countdown ticked to 0, and the live stream blinked on like a stage trapdoor. Ethan Miller said, "I won't hide," though his hands shook off camera. Notifications fired like hail across the screen. He breathed once, then twice, and faced the light. Ethan said, "I lied by silence, not by deceit," and the chat split into knives and bandages. He cued a clip that showed context, shaky and raw. Anna stood in the doorway, a shadow that wasn't leaving. Ethan said, "This is the whole night, uncut," and dragged the file into view. The room hummed with the ring light's heat. He stared down the lens as if it were a jury that never slept. Midstream, a new window barged in like a siren. Daniel Carter said, "Transparency time," and requested to join. Ethan accepted, trapped by spectacle. Daniel smiled with the confidence of a winning headline. He said, "Your audience deserves the receipts," and flashed curated screenshots. Ethan said, "You're cherry-picking," yet the chat roared for blood. Daniel said, "Own the harm, not the optics," savoring the moral stage. The stream's viewer count spun upward like a slot machine. Ethan felt the floor tilt under his chair. The show had found its villain, and he wasn't sure who it was. The chat demanded her voice, and the doorway stepped forward. Anna said, "I sent files when I got scared," and the words landed like a siren gone flat. Ethan Miller said, "You chose them over me," gripping the desk hard. She said, "I chose the truth before it ate us," and met his stare. Daniel smirked, pleased to be moderator of pain. Ethan said, "You made me a monster for clicks," and dragged a folder to the screen. The preview showed edits cut by an outside hand. Anna said, "I didn't feed him that," pointing at a watermark. For a heartbeat, the tide hesitated. Ethan opened the folder like a thrown door. He said, "Here's the raw export, timestamps intact." Screens filled with metadata, dull and indisputable. A clipped voice memo surfaced with a laugh that wasn't his. Riley Stone said, "Run the proof from a reaction window already recording." Ethan played a call where Daniel pitched a narrative arc weeks ago. Daniel Carter said, "That's out of context," while his smile cracked. Anna whispered, "That watermark belongs to him," and pointed again. The chat shifted from claws to questions. The download bar crawled toward daylight. The stream turned electric and terrible. Ethan Miller said, "You scripted my collapse," and the words struck like thunder. Daniel Carter said, "People wanted accountability," yet his voice thinned. Riley Stone said, "We follow the facts while liking the spike in views." Anna said, "I will sign a statement," and faced the lens. The chat fired question marks, then torches, then doubt. Ethan cued a final clip that mapped edits to Daniel's uploads. The timeline bloomed with connecting lines. He said, "This is the story you built," and hit publish. For one suspended beat, the crowd forgot how to cheer. The room felt lighter when the screens went dark, like a fever finally breaking. Ethan Miller said, "I'm deactivating," and the words steadied his breath. Tabs blinked with warnings that sounded like pleas. He clicked through each one, careful and final. The feed begged for more, but silence held. Notifications still tried to claw back in. He set the phone face down and listened to the quiet. Ethan said, "No more explaining to people who want a villain." The cursor hovered, then confirmed goodbye. Outside, dawn thinned the night. He watched the light crawl over the floor and let the noise die. The suitcase appeared before the apology. Anna set it by the door with careful hands. Ethan Miller said, "You don't have to go," though the past had already left. Anna said, "I made it worse trying to make it right," voice thin with truth. The air tasted like old storms and new dust. She placed a key on the table and stepped back. They stood in the space where trust used to live. Ethan nodded, a surrender without bitterness. Anna said, "I'll give you room to heal." The door opened to a soft hallway hush. Their silence was the first honest thing. The algorithm never grieved, it simply pivoted. Riley moved on with a gleam that matched her thumbnail font. Riley Stone said, "New case, new lessons," smoothing the script with a smile. Sponsors returned like migrating birds. The intro sting hit, and the comments cheered. Ethan Miller said, "Good to an empty room," meaning it, and not. He felt both smaller and freer as her timeline forgot him. Riley dissected a fresh scandal with shining tools. The world applauded her cadence and kept scrolling. The machine purred, fed by a different name. Daniel didn't apologize. He optimized. A slick premiere rolled out with celebratory edits. Daniel Carter said, "Growth comes from hard truths, dressed in victory's polish." Charts rose behind him like stained glass. He thanked viewers for demanding standards. Ethan Miller said, "You won the race I never entered." The crowd crowned him with emotes and badges. His brand hardened into doctrine while the feed applauded. The narrative was stabilized, market ready, export clean. Somewhere, the clip of a breakdown became a footnote on a slide. The park was ordinary, which felt heroic. Ethan sat on a bench and let the day be unfamed. A breeze fussed with the leaves like small applause. Ethan Miller said, "I'm not a lesson, I'm a person tasting each word." He opened a blank notebook and did not title it. Pages waited without judgment. A jogger passed and did not recognize him. Somewhere the internet devoured something else. Ethan closed his eyes and chose a smaller life for now. The quiet did not cure him, but it held. Night pressed against the glass when his phone lit with a notification. The preview read like a dare that knew his pulse better than he did. Ethan Miller said, "Who is this?" as the message opened into a single line. It said, "You thought it was over," and the room answered with a hush. The chat icons were off, yet the words swarmed like gnats in his head. He checked the sender and saw the static avatar that never blinked. Noah Gray said, "Open the door," followed by a timestamp and his street. Ethan killed the screen, but the echo kept talking inside the dark. He stood very still, and time began to count louder than the clock. Outside, a car idled, and the thin whine of a drone traced a circle above. Morning arrived with a login prompt that refused to remember him. The platform claimed maintenance, then cited policy, then went quiet. Ethan Miller said, "Reset," and waited for an email that never came. The handle returned as not found, like a door that erased its hinges. Old embeds broke into gray boxes, captions dangling without bodies. He scrolled his past and found it hollowed like a museum after fire. Anna knocked once, and he nodded toward the void where a life had been. She said, "Maybe this is mercy," and placed tea on the sill to cool. He whispered nothing, because nothing held better than any defense. The city breathed, and his name slipped off the timeline like rain. Dusk folded the block until shapes learned to lie about their edges. A figure paused across the street, merged with a tree, and waited. Ethan Miller said, "I see you," to the window that returned his face. The elevator groaned somewhere below, then stilled like a held breath. Noah Gray said, "Check your porch," and another folder blinked in. Inside were photos from last winter, shot through a frost rim. The angles proved he had been traced home by patient footsteps. Anna called the police, and the ringtone chimed into the dark. The line promised a car, then suggested locks, then suggested prayers. In the hall, a shoe scraped, and quiet learned a sharper name. Noon carried a fresh scandal wearing brand new outrage. The feed forgot yesterday like a goldfish that learned to monetize. Riley Stone said, "On to tonight's breakdown," and cued a stinger. Daniel Carter said, "Lessons learned," and pinned a sponsor code. The mob posted shrug emojis, then sprinted toward a louder fire. Ethan Miller said, "Let them go," and felt the room widen by inches. The silence returned with furniture in it and stayed for coffee. His mentions cooled to ash, and the ash blew out the open window. A few messages remained, small and human, asking if he was eating. He answered some, and let the rest be grace without reply. Night came soft, and the bench from the park remembered his weight. He turned off his phone, and watched the sky rehearse its old tricks. A breeze rehearsed the leaves until they forgave the afternoon. Ethan Miller said, "You never really know who's watching to the dark." The words felt less like fear and more like a key he could pocket. He stood, folded the notebook, and chose a small road toward home. Behind him, a street camera blinked, patient and untroubled. Far away, a server wrote a log that would never trend. He walked into a future with fewer witnesses and better weather. The night kept his footprint, and the world kept turning anyway.